So good morning all and welcome, and hopefully that will be the only hiccup this morning, and if it is, that will be great for me. And welcome to the State of the Service Roadshow event for Western Australia. My name is Samantha Patuto and I will be your MC and facilitator today, and I really thank you all for joining us online. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of whose country I present from today, the Whadjuk people, part of the Greater Noongar Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders, past and present. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to traditional custodians on whose country that you are participating from today. Now, I'll just give a quick overview of how today will run. To start, we will be using Slido for some public service trivia. Then a keynote address will be delivered by Australian Public Service Deputy Commissioner Helen Wilson, followed by a short panel discussion, and then your questions will be answered by the panel. All questions can be submitted by Slido. There's a QR code on the screen now. So if you take out your mobiles and you scan the code, that will take you to join and enter the number that's on the screen. You can also join from your website browser as well, from browser. For those of you who are already on the site, you should see the first question now, and there'll be 20 seconds on the clock for everyone to answer before we show the correct answer. So the question there is, what is the most popular male name for Australian public servants in WA? So the answer to that, the most popular male name, probably not surprisingly, is David. The second question, what is the most popular female name for Australian public servants in WA? The answer to the most popular female name is Michelle. Question 3, what is the average age of an Australian public servant in WA? The answer to the average age is 45. Question 4, what are the top 3 most common countries of birth outside Australia for WA APS employees? So the answer to the most common countries of birth is England, India, and New Zealand. Well, wasn't that interesting? And thanks to everyone who played along. I would now like to invite Helen Wilson, the Australian Public Service Commissioner, to deliver the keynote address. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks so much, Samantha. And I probably should just caveat, I'm actually the Deputy Commissioner. Lovely Peter Woolcott, if you're watching, you're still the Commissioner. And it's also worth noting that David was the most popular name in Tasmania this morning as well. But thank you to everyone who's joined us online today. It's wonderful to have you connected for this event. There's over 7,500 public servants that work in WA, so I'm not sure all 7,500 of you are online, but welcome to those that are. This event is really our chance to get together as a community, to listen to one another and to share our knowledge and experiences as public servants. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Meghan Quinn, who is the Secretary of the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, so welcome to Meghan, and to lovely Sally Dawkins, who's the Director, WA Office for DFAT, who's actually in Perth. Now, Meghan is actually from WA and she's a little upset that the Public Service Commission didn't fly her back to Perth today. But anyway, it's lovely to be joined by Meghan and Sally. And together as the panel, we're really here to answer and discuss your questions and provide insight into the opportunities and challenges facing us all as public servants. And that's where I really do want to start. The APS is operating in an increasingly complex environment. This is due to the ongoing economic and social challenges post-COVID, natural disasters, the geopolitical disruptions right across the world, and the fact that we're operating in a very tight labour market. To address these and build a public service for the future, we want to make sure that the Australian Public Service embodies integrity in everything we do, puts people and businesses at the centre of policy and services, is a model employer, and we all have the capability to do our jobs well. We're not perfect, but we will continue to build trust, to collaborate, to learn and be a great place to work and meet the challenges of this increasingly complex and interconnected world. I thought I would touch on 4 things this morning, and I think we've just got a bit of an audio issue, but hopefully I can still be heard. But the 4 things I wanted to touch on today are the APS Academy, integrity, leadership, and workforce issues, including mobility, diversity, and flexibility. So the APS Academy, it's one of the ways we can all continue to grow and to learn and develop as public servants. The Academy provides an integrated whole of service approach to learning and development for the Australian Public Service. To do this, the Academy is focused on equipping all of us with the necessary foundations to deliver great policy, to deliver great services, and these are known as the APS crafts. All areas of the APS crafts are guided by APS values and ultimately help to contribute to the success of individuals' continuous learning journeys. And we all have a responsibility to commit to learning and to developing our skills. I encourage you all to head to the Academy website and see the selection of courses on offer. There is a great newsletter that you can subscribe to, and I know my team are behind the scenes, and they're going to put a link up into the chat box so that you can all get on and have a look at the Academy and the wide range of courses that it offers. Integrity. It really is the core APS craft. It's fundamental to maintaining the trust of the community. We do have a high standard of integrity and professionalism, but to safeguard this, we do need to strengthen our integrity culture. On the APS Commission's website, we publish what's called an integrity metrics resource. This is designed to support agencies to understand their integrity capability, to have conversations around integrity, which in my words really means doing the right thing at the right time to deliver the best outcomes for Australians as sought by the government of the day. So again, encourage you to get on and have a look at that integrity metrics resource. Leadership. I get asked often about leadership, and to build a culture of integrity, we need to lead by example. The new Secretary's Charter of Leadership Behaviours sets out the expectations we have of leaders in the Australian Public Service. The Australian Public Service Commission does manage a range of leadership and talent development programs to support not just current but emerging leaders. And those emerging leaders, when I think about when I was an EL staff member versus what some of our EL staff are doing today, you're managing in an increasingly diverse you're managing a diverse workforce, increasingly geographically dispersed in the digital age. So how can we really grow and support those emerging leaders is something that is a priority for the Commission. And you can always find more information on our website. So turning to workforce issues, mobility. It is increasing across the APS and it's really pleasing to see. In 21-22, we saw a 5.4% 8% increase in ongoing staff taking up mobility opportunities on a permanent basis. This is the highest annual rate that we've had in 2 decades. The mobility framework was released in 2021, and 1/3 of respondents to the recent employee census reported a temporary move at some time in the last 3 years, with 1/5 of those going to a different agency. Mobility enhances the capability of teams, of employees, of organisations, and it helps you to learn to speak other people's languages. Exposure to different roles and workplaces increases employee skills, and it helps you to build networks and understand the variety of roles that there are across the service. If you're interested in finding more about mobility and the opportunities that might be there for you, please visit the APS Jobs website and go to the Temporary Opportunities tab. A skilled workforce, absolute priority for the government and for the Commission. And the APS Workforce Strategy 2025, the aim is to support a cultural shift in strategic workforce planning. The strategy is supported by the development of what we call APS professional streams. And we've got 3. We've got data, we've got digital, and we've got human resource professions. And those professional streams are aimed at lifting the data and digital expertise of public servants, including leaders. We've got a range of entry pathways and career development opportunities in those professions so that the Australian Public Service becomes more attractive to join and is an attractive place to stay. 2 recent initiatives that I really do want to mention around that sort of attraction is the Affirmative Measure Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Recruitment Hub, which was launched in July 2022, and the Affirmative Measure Disability Employment Recruitment Hub, launched in November 2022. So they're really key as we look at our employee value proposition. The future of work. We know we need to broaden and think differently about the way we attract a talented and diverse workforce. How do we encourage people to become public servants? And how do we recruit into senior roles? We need to invest more in our people, and we need to think about how we nurture them and how we help them to broaden their careers and stay in the service. To enhance our employee value proposition, we're exploring options around location and around flexibility. And we're looking to reinvest in internal capability and reduce our reliance on external expertise. The Commission is developing an APS-wide approach to flexibility. And while agency heads will continue to be best placed to make decisions about the operational requirements of their agency in a competitive labour market, there is a compelling case to support greater flexibility across the service and embed flexible work in the APS employee value proposition. Flexibility needs to work not just for the individual, it needs to work for the team and it needs to work for the organisation. So look, in closing, and I feel like we say this every single year, but 2023 is going to be a big year for the public service, and it doesn't look like things will be slowing down anytime soon. So I challenge you all to please look after yourselves. Please continue the incredible work that you do, but also take care of one another. Thank you again for tuning in today, and I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion, and it's back to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Helen, and please pass on my apologies to Commissioner Woolcock also. Thanks so much. Obviously, the State of the Service, as many of you would know, the State of the Service Roadshow is an annual occurrence where we can come together and talk through ideas for the public service. We can share our stories and experiences. The Australian Public Service Commission is capturing some of the stories, and will now show a small brief trailer of some of the stories that we have captured so far.
My name is Leanne. I'm based in Canberra. My name is Leanne. I'm based in Canberra. I work at the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and this is my story.
Hello, my name is Ben.
My name is Sunam Safar.
My name's Hannah.
My name is Mohammed Al Abri.
I'm Grant Nicholson.
My name is Robin Edmonds.
My name's Andrew Pfeiffer.
Hey there, my name is Belle Hogg.
My name is Megan Kopatz, and this is my APS story. So I got to talk to different agencies, see inside their cultures and their initiatives and what they were doing, and I thought, wow, there's so much going on in the APS. I really need to broaden my horizons.
Starting out in service delivery, taking calls from Australians who were unemployed and hearing some stories that broke my heart, and that really started off a very rewarding time being able to help the Australian public, and that hasn't changed.
There's plenty of opportunity around now. They've got a thing called a development register, that if you're interested in developing your career and working your way up from maybe as a team leader.
I continue to learn and share all around government through the amazing communities that I've been involved with. There's a thing called the digital profession, and I'm running a visual scribing community. So we have local, state, federal, all kinds of different government agencies, departments that come together.
The advice that I would give to people is do experience time in other organisations. It's well worth it to expand your horizons and to go and spend time discovering what other agencies do and sharing your talent around. But at the same time, if you're comfortable in the organisation you're adding value there. There is value for the organisation in you staying for a period of time in the organisation.
Bring like-minded people together. We share webinars, we bring in speakers, and we hold events like clothes swaps. The next big event we're trying to hold is an APS-wide event for Clean Up Australia Day on the 5th of March 2023. We hope to see you there.
I started up their neurodiversity network, which grew to 400 members in 1 year. And I was super thrilled that the ATO supported me in co-founding their network.
And so we decided to bring people together for a bit of a meeting just to explore what it was that agencies were already doing, what they were maybe aware of, what they thought were opportunities and what they really wanted to learn. So we kind of wanted to have this exploratory meeting just to, I guess, gauge the level of interest and maturity, if you will, right, with neurodiversity awareness and inclusion across the APS.
So there was so much support because I was at the learning stage. People were there to support me, help me, gave me like the network and development opportunities, but within APS 6 is something I have to find on my own. But it's really amazing and challenging for me because this was something I was looking for, that where I can challenge myself, get out of the comfort zone, and may be an inspiration for others.
My highlight was definitely the evaluation workshop I led, because it directly led to the agency changing its HR processes in a meaningful way, so I thought it was very impactful. My key takeaway from this whole experience working on the project is that each and every person has power to create change.
We'll now move into our panel discussion. And please remember, if you have a question for the panel, send it through via Slido. If you have a question and also want to hear the answer to that question, you can like the question and vote it up. So the more votes a question gets, the more likely it will be to be answered. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Please join me on the stage. So we have Helen, who returns, Meghan Quinn, PSM Secretary at Department of Industry, Science and Resources, Sally Dawkins, Director, Western Australia State Office of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I have a couple of questions to start our discussion, but I do know I've got some colleagues online because they have said it's unusual for me to be muted, so I do expect them to put a question in. So the first question is, thinking about the APS reform priorities, let's focus on what capacity the APS needs to do its job well. One of the suggested ways of achieving this is through performance management. What advice do you have for our leaders on having those conversations with staff? So who would
Well, Sam, I'm going to be a bit cheeky. I'd actually really like to hear from Meghan, our secretary, who's had a wide career in the public service, and what Meghan thinks about that.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm here in Canberra, and as Helen said, I would have really liked to have made it back to Western Australia once again, but at least I remember the time difference on this call. When I saw this question, it was great for me to be able to think about it. I've just got 3 points that I'll make, and I'd be interested in my panel's reflections on this as well. Whenever I think about performance management, I always have to remind myself that we all bring our whole selves to work. And that one of the most important things when you're thinking about a staff member's development is to think about how and when you're going to allocate time. It's not the sort of thing you can squeeze in between other activities because it requires a lot of emotional energy to be able to be in the service of someone else, to put yourself in their shoes and to think about how you can help them develop. So you do need to think about the time and space when you're going to do that. As a leader, it's really important to create safe places and a safe culture for people to be able to have meaningful conversations about their performance. And that's a leadership task. And the last thing is it's actually really complex to think about someone's performance. And it takes training and it takes a skill and a capability. And you will always be learning because we always have to manage the situation. Things change. I remember the first time I did a performance discussion with someone, I was a little baby public servant, and the person I was talking to just said, "Look, Meghan, I'm really not interested in improving. Can we just move on, please?" And I was a bit startled because I just hadn't really thought about how to have the conversation, and I had to go away and think about how to engage with that person who had a very different mindset to me, and it was entirely appropriate for them. And so the last thing I want to say is the conversation, it's a conversation. It's not a lecture. It's a two-way discussion that requires the right time and place, the right mindset, and the right skills. And so I think that we just have to really make sure our leaders and our managers have the capability to help staff through their development process. But I'd be really interested to hear, does that resonate with others on the panel, or do you have a different take?
It definitely resonates with me, I suppose, and a piece of advice I would give would be to engage the support services from HR professionals early as well, so that the process, that you're considering all of those elements in those discussions. So yeah, that would be my other piece of advice. I don't know, Sally, did you have anything?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's performance appraisal time in my department right now, so it's certainly something I've been thinking about. Similar points to Meghan, I've also got 3. The first that I always keep in mind is that a performance appraisal discussion should never be the first time a colleague is hearing of an issue that you want to raise. You want to be having those conversations early and often and in an open door and ongoing way. My second point, similar to Meghan's point about bringing your whole self to work, is get to know your staff, get to know what motivates them, what underpins their desire to be at work. And often you can get much better performance out of your team if you understand what they're passionate about it and what's kind of motivating them to do a good job. And likewise, if you notice a drop in performance or something's going wrong, is it something going on outside the workplace that maybe is impacting that and they need some support through it? And my third point is I'm a big believer that we all have superpowers in terms of the skill sets that we bring to work. Some of us like to think big strategic thoughts. Other people are really happy being in a spreadsheet, getting down the details. And so I think thinking carefully about the skill set that you have within a team and allocating tasks accordingly to enable those people to bring those powers to bear in their tasks. You'll have a happier team and you'll have a more productive team if you can use each of their special capabilities in a targeted way.
Thanks. The next question that we have is, WA has the highest percentage of staff that identify as being born overseas. How do you think this diversity helps the public service represent and support the Australian public?
Why don't I kick off? That is just a fantastic stat. The research evidence is overwhelming. Diverse teams get better results. So knowing the data, understanding how we can attract, retain a diverse workforce is something that the Australian Public Service Commission is an absolute priority. So again, I'm just going to make that point. Diverse teams get better results. So how we think about recruiting from a range of cohorts, from neurodiverse, from cold. There's a range of ways that we do that in the public service. There's no doubt there's room for improvement, but what a great stat. Well done, WA. But Meghan or Sally?
Thanks very much, Helen. I'm actually part of that statistic. I'm an immigrant. I moved to Australia as a kid, and I'm not on the very exotic end of the diversity spectrum, but I do want to tell a quick story. When my family moved, we came from a privileged middle-class background, so I'm not trying to sort of stretch my experience to so many of the struggling immigrant stories that I know many of us have. But certainly my parents couldn't take much money with them when they left the country and had to sort of start from scratch in some ways. And my mum used to look for activities that we could do that were free because she was trying to entertain us without spending money. And she used to take us to the Burswood Casino, as it then was, and we used to ride up and down in the glass lifts because that was fun and it was free. So I then moved to Canberra after university and spent sort of 17 years with DFAT overseas and in Canberra. And I just moved back to Perth to take up this job last year. And I quite regularly have to go to Crown Casino these days for quite high profile events. And frankly, it means a lot to me every time I walk past those elevators, because I now walk past them representing the government in a senior capacity, my host adopted country. So I think that those of us who have immigrated to Australia and now work for the public service, there's also a deep sense of pride and a deep sense of service that we've been lucky enough to come to this country that's opened its doors and will still let us come and represent its public and its government. So I suspect that many of our public servants who fall into that category bring that extra bit of passion and pride.
Next question is a question from and private enterprise, especially given the increased cost of living.
All right, I think I'll jump in first, but look, I'll start by saying the government is committed to a fair and equitable pay rise for all APS employees. And a goal of the Australian Public Service Commission is to complete that service-wide bargaining process that is about to kick off in around late March, to complete that process as quickly as possible so employees can receive timely pay increases. There's a task force currently in the Commission that's considering options also around not just pay but terms and conditions. And those details that I think you're asking around specific pay increases and proposed common terms and conditions is really a matter for those bargaining and negotiations. So we can't really provide much more detail at this stage. But as I said, process looking to kick off late March.
Thanks so much for that. The next question, what is being done to support hiring from the regions to do roles that can be done outside of Canberra? Or do you see the APS staying Canberra-centric? So probably hand to Helen or Meghan to start with, and then maybe if Sally or I have kind of some observations from working in WA.
So I'm happy to start. So this goes back to the question of diversity, and just to reiterate that the more the Australian public service reflects the community that we serve, the better the role that we'll play. And so that seems very obvious, but there's clearly some systemic issues in the public service that we have to address to get there. And we need to do more on diversity in terms of where our staff come from. And we also need to do better on how our staff get promoted, because there's a difference between our entry level and the senior leadership of the public service. And we also need to think about geography. Now, we've got some great opportunities to really lean into these issues in the next few years. I know from my department, we've got a geographical footprint right around the country. We've got more than 50 locations that staff can work. The question, so we tick the box on how many opportunities there are in locations, but what we're really focusing on is the genuine opportunities in those areas. So the opportunities for different people to be able to join the public service, for us to recognise their skills and capabilities, and for us to give people career paths, not just jobs. And we also do need to lean in on diversity issues around neurodiverse, First Nations, people with different language backgrounds and things like that. So on recruitment, it's about value proposition. My department is deliberately looking to build capability outside Canberra. The benefits that we saw through the pandemic in having on-the-ground capability and a dispersed workforce were clear for all of us in Canberra to see. And I like to remind my colleagues, there are 2 Western Australian secretaries on the Secretaries Board, and there are people from other parts of the country as well. That diversity genuinely brings better decision making.
Thank you. Sally, did you have any comments?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's an excellent question, and it's something that all APS agencies are really grappling with, including post-COVID. I was interested in the State of the Service report that showed that, in fact, I think it's 40-something% of APS are in Canberra. So we sort of have this impression that it's the vast majority, but it's actually not. We are now quite dispersed around the country. I think part of the challenge is around that diversity piece as we increasingly recruit people who are from different called backgrounds. The sense of place and family and connection means something different, I think, to what it did, 50, 60 years ago when we just assumed that people would pick up their nuclear family and move them to Canberra. So part of our efforts to attract called public servants and First Nations public servants is recognising that people do have a connection to place and a connection to extended family, and that's going to pull them to stay in their hometowns rather than be able to move to Canberra. So that's part of the challenge around diversity.
Thanks, Sally. The next question dovetails quite in, and maybe you wanted to comment on this too, Sally, where staff feel that there's not enough career progression opportunities, especially in WA, and what's being done to address this?
Thanks, Sam. I think Helen's point in her opening remarks around mobility were really insightful on this point. Perhaps if we look at agency by agency, there's a perception or a risk that we will reach a natural ceiling in a certain location. But I think if we consider a broad whole of public service approach, then there's always opportunity, I think, to learn something new and progress your experience by moving laterally through the different agencies. That's good for us personally in terms of giving us different perspectives on how the public service works and what it delivers to the public. And it provides, I think, stepping stone opportunities and different ways to advance your career rather than simply looking at the silo of just one agency.
Thanks, Sally. Maybe this question we could start with you, Meghan. With a focus on employee retention, how do you feel doing more with less is impacting on existing staff? And what is being done to support staff burnout?
So it's undeniable that during the pandemic, everybody, our public servants and others, went through a pretty stressful time. And lots of parts of the public service were asked to step up to provide core services in trying times. So we do need to make sure we think about staff, how staff are travelling in that environment. The echoes of the pandemic are still there. As Helen said, there's a lot of demands on us still. We have a government that's got a very large agenda and it's very keen to get on and implement its agenda. I'm always struck by the importance of leadership and management in making sure staff are looked after and to make sure that we're allocating resources to where it needs to go and people have the capability that they need to do their job. So it always comes down to people speaking up and their managers managing and leadership being there to support staff. and then having the general support systems in organisations when staff really need help. The public service has done a lot better in recent times in supporting individuals and teams through stress. I know in my organisation we have mobilised a great deal of network supports and professionalism to support staff. And so all I can say is that you need to speak up, you need to talk to your managers, and your leaders need to lead so that you have the capability and the support to look after yourself. As Helen mentioned at the end of her presentation, all of us want people to be safe and looked after at work.
Samantha, can I just add, I talk a lot about psychological safe workplaces, which really just means you should feel free to raise anything without fear of retribution. There's no doubt that these are difficult conversations, but as Meghan said, we can encourage you to speak up. There are conversations that always have to be had around priorities, and that if we can get agreements within teams, through leadership about what those priorities are so that everyone understands, and then you have that resource allocation question. So yeah, difficult conversations do need to be had. It is around how you can prioritise, and then resources do need to flow to the highest priorities as determined by sort of teams and leaders and within organisations.
Thanks. The next question we've got is around how it's been proved that we can work effectively both in the office and at home. So how is the APS going to embrace this hybrid approach moving forward? So Helen, I'm not sure if you had any comments on that first.
I will jump in. As I said, look, the Commission is developing an APS-wide approach to flexibility, and look, there's many different types of flexibility. It's hours, it's location, it can be access to leave. And the nature of flexibility kind of, does depend a little bit on the role. And the other point I'd really like to make is, flexibility has to be mutually beneficial. It has to be beneficial for the individual, but it also has to be beneficial for the team and for the organisation. And I often get asked about, where's the value in coming back into the office? There's extraordinary value in face-to-face interaction. It can improve employee well-being, it goes to the culture of an organisation. And the other point I'd like to make is, new starters, not just graduates, but anyone that's new to a team, new to an organisation. You'd hope that they would get the same experience that maybe some of us had when we started, that does go to that face-to-face interaction, that does go to being part of the culture of an organisation. But maybe Meghan wants to add something to this conversation.
So I just want, the main thing I always think about flexibility, I've worked every type of flexibility there is in the public service. I've worked part-time, I've worked shift hours, I've worked split shifts, I've worked job shared with people, I've taken time off, I've come back in. So I've worked in different locations, I've had all the IT issues that people have had. So we've got great opportunity now to embrace technology to make it easier to do a lot of things, which makes me think we always have to be very deliberate about what we're doing. So deliberate in our decision making, what we want as individuals, what really works for us and why, and recognise that can shift over time. And similarly, talking with our teams and our managers about what works for them, and for them to be very deliberate about their decision making, and for there to be conversations to have a meeting of minds on those things. Because what works for one team and one individual might not work for that same team and individual in future. And the most important thing is that it works for everybody over time. So there's guidelines and general discussions happening at the APS level, but at the end of the day, it's always going to matter for your team and as you as an individual. And that means that the system has to support you to have those conversations.
Thank you. And maybe we'll start with you, Meghan, on this one as well. What are some of the ways we can improve geographical representation in WA for functions and expertise not in the state that will assist to improve service levels?
So there's different tools that we need to think about in terms of geographical location. Partly it's about what the service and what needs to be delivered. So do we need people on the ground all the time? Do people actually want to be there on the ground all the time? Or do we need people to be at certain places for certain activities? So it all comes down to what service we're delivering and how do we encourage people to do those roles? Because as Helen mentioned, it's a tight labour market. And we've got an ageing of the population. So when we think about the public service, we need to think about how we're deploying our people in the best way to the highest value. And a lot of that it's a lot quicker sometimes to go and spend a week somewhere, but you don't need to be there for the whole year. So we need to think about flexibility through time, flexibility in locations, but also talking with our staff about how we encourage staff to do the sorts of roles that we need in different places. And there is a lot more flexibility with technology. Flights and things like that, a little less flexible, I have to say. Trying to get back and forward between different parts of the country at the moment. But also, how do we build capability in local areas that we can draw on when needed? And that's a broader question. And I know, for example, I've been talking to my counterpart in Western Australia and in the Western Australian Public Service and how we can work together to do some of those roles as well.
Thanks. And I might start with Helen on this one, if you wanted to maybe make some comments, and then Sally, from your perspective based here currently in WA. So why are jobs that are able to be performed remotely not open to staff located in WA? Often these jobs are advertised that don't include WA as a suitable location.
All right, again, it kind of goes back to that point. So it is sometimes role specific. So without kind of knowing the specifics of what the question might be referring to, let me be really clear that this flexible work arrangements, being more location agnostic than we were 5 years ago, is absolutely here to stay, and we're going to celebrate it. What the Australian Public Service Commission can do is, particularly when it comes to recruitment, look at that need or how people reference location. So we're working with colleagues right across the public service to sort of say, hey, think about that location. There's no doubt that some jobs will have to be location specific, but where they don't have to be, how do we think about that recruitment? How do we think about how we write the job ad? So that is absolutely all happening. But yeah, it might be worth passing to Sally.
Thanks very much, Helen. Yeah, I think it's a similar point to one of the previous questions, that COVID taught us a lot about what we can do remotely, but it also taught us a lot about what we can't. And I think that was a really important learning that we had through the pandemic about the importance of being on the ground, being in person, being connected to teams. And so there is that balance to be struck between what can be done remotely and what can't. As a manager responsible for recruiting my office here in Perth, I can assure everyone that in the current global and national labour market, we as managers are looking under every rock and exploring every option to try and get good staff. And so if there is any prospect that a job can be done remotely, and that we can throw the net more widely to recruit more broadly, we are definitely exploring those options, because it's not in our interest to keep it narrow, to keep it confined, and to limit the number of good people who could apply. So it's certainly a question that is front of mind for all managers and all recruiters is, what is the nature of this job? Does it need to be done from a specific location? How much can be done remotely? And therefore, what is the widest possible pool of applicants we can throw this open to?
Thank you both. And my observation has been that jobs are being advertised more broadly. Like, obviously there is those specific jobs that need to be done in a certain location, but when you do look at the APSC jobs website, there's a much more broader range of roles that are being advertised in WA. So that's been my observation, but obviously there is always going to be that percentage that can't. I'd really like to hear people.
Can I just add, sorry on that one, sorry to jump in, but sometimes jobs are just advertised and it doesn't actually say location at all. So can I just encourage you, if you're in Western Australia, don't presume it doesn't include you. Reach out and talk to the people who've done the advert, because they might just have not actually said where it is, and you shouldn't presume that it's actually in New South Wales or Victoria or Canberra. If you're in WA, put your hand up.
That's great advice. Just move on to the next question. And whilst I said I'd only have one IT glitch today, I've had two. So how do we, and like I said, I'd love to hear comments from all of you on this. How can we do more to promote the benefits of working with WA staff across the APS? The assumption is often inconvenience rather than that it offers flexibility.
I'm going to jump in and then pass to Sally. I'm going to really challenge that. I've recently spent time in the Australian Bureau of Statistics that had a really big presence in Perth, and it was a huge benefit. Now, I need to caveat that I'm not encouraging anyone to work incredibly long hours, but the ability to work with teams that were there at the end of the day was just amazing, and vice versa, you know, for staff to sort of start a bit of work, then collaborate with people that can continue throughout the day. So again, please, I'm not talking about 24-hour days, but what I'm talking about is the real benefits that come with sharing and starting something and knowing that there's staff there that are in Perth that might be in a different time zone, but celebrating that and using it to your advantage.
I was going to make exactly the same point, Helen. DFAT is increasingly embracing remote working around the globe. So we have a number of employees, usually spouses of other employees who are posted to our embassies, who continue to work back to Canberra, and they can be in a completely different time zone. And that's actually really liberating for a Canberra team to know that at their 5 p.m, they can pass a piece of work over to someone who's sitting in London or who's sitting in Abuja or who's sitting in Peru, and they can continue that work overnight, giving those permission in Canberra to go home and to come back in the morning and having that workload advanced. So I see huge benefit in having people spread across different time zones. It does make it difficult to connect in person and reinforces the importance of having those systems in place to have regular meetings and regular catch-ups. But I think you can get a lot of benefits for the trade-off.
And I'll just finish that the question implicitly is around collaboration. So how can you ensure that people look up and out and draw on the capability and skills that are available to them if they're not right in front of them? And that goes to a culture of collaboration, but it also goes to a curiosity to make sure people are curious about what other people think and how do they see it as a positive to bring in diverse views and different capabilities and skills into their project or whatever they might be working on. So ultimately that comes from the leadership from the top. It comes from leaders genuinely always asking, so who have you talked to? What do other people think? Have we made sure that we've brought in the capability from different parts of your organisation? And so that openness and the importance of senior leaders asking those questions so that people instantly think, who can I get to help? Have I made sure I've got input? As opposed to thinking, oh, I've got this is just for me to do. It's always about collaboration. We get better outcomes if we work collectively across teams, across organisations, and get that diverse input.
Thanks to you all. So the next question we've got is, leaders seem to focus on negative points with staff. What is being done for leaders to bring positivity to the workplace?
So I might take this as a new secretary, 6 months in, and one of the things that I always talk to my staff about is having fun. So I'll say again, we bring ourselves to work, but we don't just bring our work self to work, we bring our entire self to work. And it's really important that our teams and the people we work with know who we are, but that means we have to feel comfortable and safe to be our true selves. And so that goes to the culture of an organisation. But I've always said that we spend a lot of time at work, whether remotely or thinking about work physically there, and building places where people can be themselves and it's fun is very important, because that's how you get the best performing institutions, and that's how we end up serving the Australian people in a better way. So I always emphasise fun. There are times where you need to pass back messages for improvement, because things change, we need to change the way we do things. So there are times you have to deliver messages that aren't as well received, or do cause some issues for people to resolve. But on balance, I always bring the fun to work. And I know it's very interesting in the collection of people around the Secretary's table, when we talk about it, I'm not alone by any means. So there is a shift in leadership, I think, with people recognising the importance of everyone bringing themselves to work.
Thank you. Very important point there. We've got one last question. What do you see as the future state of the APS in 3 to 5 years' time? Helen, did you want to?
I hope, as we think about one APS, it's picking up on Meghan's point, that there is genuine collaboration, and that we celebrate that we reward people for it. The way to solve the complex challenges in front of us is to get the broadest, most diverse group of people in a room to solve them. So I'm going to leave that one APS, and what I would love to see in 3 to 5 years' time is one APS that collaborates really, really well and genuinely, which I think we do. We do it really well, but there's no doubt I think we're going to have to do more of it, given the really complex challenges and problems that we're being asked to solve for the government and for the community.
Thanks, Helen. Meghan, any comments on?
I absolutely agree with Helen, but I might put it in a slightly more retail way, if I like to say. Less utopia.
Oh, yeah.
The less utopia, if you haven't seen that Utopia TV show, then you just look on the YouTube and you'll get the sense of it. Less utopia and more about focusing on our true purpose, everyone knowing how they fit into their organisation and what purpose they're there for, investing in our people and making sure processes are working for the people to deliver that purpose. So less kind of random process events and much more about delivering on our core purpose of making Australia a better place for people to live.
Thanks. And Sally, any final words?
I completely agree with what's been said. I think that the nature of the national and global challenges that we have facing us over the next 3 to 5 years are increasingly integrated. We can't talk about foreign affairs and domestic affairs anymore. We can't talk about political things and economic things anymore. We can't talk about social issues and financial issues. Everything, the problems and the solutions are all intertwined. And so we as an APS need to bring all of our powers to bear. We need to be talking to each other much more. We need to be drawing on the strengths and skills that we have in each department, the history and the knowledge that we bring from each of our respective traditional areas, and putting it on the table to craft innovative and interconnected solutions to these big challenges. We have an ambitious government agenda that we are trying to pursue, and we're going to need to put all of our hands to the wheel to get that to happen. So I agree, one APS is what we need and what we'll have to put into place.
Listen, thanks all so much for your comments. That brings our panel discussion to a close, and I'm sure that everybody is giving you a virtual clap out there. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank everyone for watching and contributing, for putting through questions. It's fantastic, for people supporting the WA State of the Service Roadshow event. Quite selfishly, before we sign out today, I'd like to give a quick plug for the Australian Government Leadership Network, of which I'm the chair here in WA. So this network sees APS staff of EL level and above come together both in person and virtually to discuss ideas and connect. And it's a great way to find out what's happening in each other's departments and to broaden your professional networks. If you're interested in hearing any more about this, please go to the APSC website, and the events team will put up a URL in the chat function. so that you can go on and register. And please also keep an eye out for a follow-up email from today's session as well. It will have information about how you can share your own story of working in the APS, like the stories we saw in the video. And it will also have a link to the recording of today's session. So thank you so much, everyone, and thanks to all of the team that made this happen.